12 ABC Radio Brisbane. Decades ago, the choice for our parents and grandparents were fairly much binary. Holden or Ford, Liberal or Labor. In 1967, for instance, 2/3 of voters were either lifelong Labor or coalition voters. That rusted on support fell to just 24% in 2025. Yet, voters looking for a break with the status quo, hostile to the political establishment, according to the polls, are flocking to One Nation. Meanwhile, the Greens vote is stagnating. They lost 3 of their 4 lower house seats at the last federal election, including their party leader. It is so bad for them. One Nation outpolls the Greens among millennials, 30 to 45-year-olds. Jonathan Sriranganathan is a former Greens councillor with the Brisbane City Council. He ran for Lord Mayor, and he reckons the party urgently needs to pivot. You say the Greens are looking less and less politically relevant because they're playing too nice with Labor.
Yeah, that's part of it, and that's definitely not the whole story. I think the political context is important. We're living through a period of, climate change is getting worse, food supply chains being disrupted, shipping costs rising, all that sort of stuff. You've got the worst housing crisis in generations, and it is still getting worse. And people are really, really struggling. So this isn't just a question of like how 2 political parties play, not how nicely they play with each other. There is a seismic shift going on in society where millions of people are really struggling to afford the mortgage, to afford the rent, and are looking not just for an alternative political party, but for system change of some kind. And obviously One Nation is presenting really easy, simplistic answers, and that's winning them over a bit of support in the short term. But the problem for the Greens is that they're not capitalising on that widespread frustration and disenchantment.
So people are thinking, and the surveys show that among One Nation voters, 75% think the system is completely broken. So if the system is completely broken, you want systems change.
Yes.
So what do you want the Greens to be? Because obviously, if that's what people are yearning for, this ain't working.
Yeah.
Then the Greens aren't answering that if the polls are correct.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the problem for the Greens is that they're trying to appeal to 2 slightly divergent constituencies. There's one constituency of people who are maybe a little more middle class, a little more well-educated, tertiary educated, so to speak, and still have some faith that our democratic systems work well, that if politicians were just a little bit more polite to each other and we stopped the argy-bargy and cooperated, we'd get things done. They still have some faith in the sort of hierarchical representative democracy system. And that's the base that the Greens have pitched to for a long time. A lot of voters like that in, say, electorates like Ryan.
You're talking about Kenmore, Indra Pillay,
Yeah.
Wong. They are people who have voted for the sole surviving member of the Greens in the lower house, Elizabeth Watson-Brown.
Yeah, who's a great rep and kind of reflects the mood of her electorate. So there are some voters who want the Greens to be that kind of party, the sort of statesman-like, responsible governance, keep the bastards honest, but don't shake things up too much. And then you have a much larger and growing constituency of voters who are hungry for change, not tweaking around the edges, deep change. And the Greens are kind of trying to pitch their message to both of those constituencies. But the problem, and I think the Greens saw this in the last federal election, is that when you have it both ways, you kind of just piss off everyone. So those, what we might call the more centralist or establishment-oriented voters, they were angry at the Greens because the Greens held out on a few crappy Labor housing bills and didn't vote them through fast enough. And they're like, oh, the Greens are too obstructionist. Meanwhile, there are a whole bunch of people who are like, oh, the Greens are just doing whatever Labor wants and they're kind of part of the political furniture. They're part of the political establishment. And so the challenge for the Greens is that they need to decide, are they a party of real change, a genuine challenge to the status quo, or are they what they've kind of been for the last few years, which is sort of a moderate, centre-left, centrist kind of party that's just trying to push Labor to be a bit more honest. And the difficulty of the Greens, if they continue to pursue that latter strategy, is that you can't get outcomes with the current Labor government unless you take a stronger position at the negotiating table. Because I think people have this idea of like, oh, if the political parties just worked together a bit more and they sat down in good faith, they could meet each other halfway. But the modern Labor Party, and no disrespect to people who vote Labor, but the modern Labor Party is highly subservient to fossil fuel interests, the property lobby, weapons manufacturing companies. So when a Greens politician sits down to negotiate with a Labor politician, you're kind of actually negotiating with a puppet of the mining industry. Or
so
a puppet
your
of the
argument is
property
you're not
industry.
going to get anywhere.
No.
There is no negotiation.
Very little on a lot of issues. And the record bears that out, because in recent years, like, Labor on climate change is still basically doing what Scott Morrison was. There's a little bit of investment in home batteries. There's been a bit more renewable energy investment, but we're still exporting phenomenal volumes of fossil fuels, of coal and gas, etc. So, like, the Greens haven't been able to get significant shifts on their core policy areas by playing nice.
You're listening to Jonathan Sriranganathan. You'll know his voice, long-time Greens councillor at the Brisbane City Council, ran for Lord Mayor in the River City. Let's say you're right. How come Max Chandler Mather, who is the let's break it and start again, let's not play nice, we need total systems change, we need to completely reimagine politics in this country, he lost his seat? Elizabeth Watson-Brown, who you say is the let's sit down and negotiate and see if we can make poor legislation a little bit better, she's the only one left standing.
Yeah, and I don't want to...
So why wouldn't they lean into the Elizabeth strategy rather than the Max Chandler Mather strategy?
I don't want to construct those two figures as binaries, because I don't think it's as simple as that. No. But what actually happened with the Greens is that they didn't take that strong system change message to the election. Max was kind of presenting that image for those 3 years from 2022 when he got in. But the party as a whole was still orienting itself and presenting itself as essentially a status quo party. They didn't roll in behind Max's bolder strategy of challenging established power structures enough.
And you think that was the problem when they said, don't vote for Dutton? What they were essentially saying is, vote for us and we'll prop up the Labor Party.
Kind of, right? But it's even more nuanced than that. It's that the Greens are saying, we're going to push Labor really, really hard. We're also going to work constructively with Labor. It's too messy a message for a lot of voters who are only paying partial attention. And I think the difficulty was that the Greens took that strong position on housing, but eventually just kind of rolled over and supported Labor's bills. So everyone who was like, oh, the Greens are being too obstructionist, they get angry at Max. But then all the people who wanted something that's really different to the Labor Party, they're like, well, why would I vote for the Greens if they're just going to support Labor? So the Greens basically have to pick a lane. They have to decide, are they an anti-establishment party of deep change, or are they a centre-left, tweak things around the edges party? And they're trying to do a bit of both at the moment. It's not working for them electorally.
The Greens are doing much better in the UK. Here in Australia, the January news poll had One Nation at 22%. Later polling has them at 26% of the primary vote, so 22 to 26%. Let's look at the Greens, 12%. So what your guest Jonathan Sriranganathan is saying is they're not getting the advantage of disenchanted Australians flocking to them in the way One Nation is. We go across the pond to the UK. The Greens leader there is doing very well, on the verge of overtaking UK Labor in the polls. This is a quote from him. "We are not here to be disappointed by you," he says to Labor. "We are here to replace you." What does defiance look like in the federal parliament? Just blocking everything?
Well, no, and I think it would be a mistake to mischaracterise this as just saying, oh, the Greens need to block more Labor bills. It's about reorienting how you operate as a political machine. So that might look, for example, like holding community votes or direct public polls to shape how the Greens decide to vote in Parliament, rather than just
let the community decide
on some issues or in some contexts where there's proper debate and information, etc. It might look like saying to Labor, we're happy to work with you and negotiate with you, but we're not going to do so behind closed doors. Because right now what tends to happen is Labor and Greens politicians have a meeting in secret, they get halfway towards an agreement, and then Labor comes out publicly and mischaracterises the discussion and the debate. And because it's a private meeting, the Greens are kind of trapped. So it's not playing by the rules of the political establishment. There needs to be a shift in messaging and tone and how you use social media, all that sort of stuff. But there also needs to be a deeper shift in terms of how the Greens orient towards the machinations of Parliament, you know, the suit wearing, the Canberra bubble, all that sort of stuff. The Greens need to step outside that in a more self-conscious and robust manner. It's not just about aesthetics and it's not just about messaging tweaking. It's something more fundamental.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Hey, you've got a 5-month-old baby. How's that?
It's really good. Yeah, it's given me a little bit more time to write articles like the one that started this off. But yeah, I feel very lucky to be able to spend a bit more time at home at the moment.
And what does it make you think as somebody who is very conscious of the planet and the climate and all the rest
actually,
of it?
honestly, it's actually radicalizing, because I think, okay, what's life going to be like for my son in 2100? I'm like, oh, it's going to be pretty bad if we keep exporting coal. So it's probably making me more militant, if anything. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks. Lovely to meet you.